There comes a moment in every person's life when the door slams shut. Sometimes it's a job you desperately wanted, a relationship you hoped would last, a dream that felt within reach, and suddenly it is taken away. Rejection is an old, familiar visitor, yet each time it knocks, it carries the same sting. We feel diminished, as though our value has been weighed and found lacking. But here is the great paradox. Rejection is often not the end. It is a redirection. It is the psyche's way of forcing us to turn toward the very path we might have avoided, yet secretly needed to walk. The real transformation begins when we stop fighting rejection and start working with it, using the very force that seems to push us away as the leverage to move forward. Today, I want to explore with you not only how to survive rejection, but how to wield it like a hidden weapon, by applying a subtle but powerful principle, reverse psychology. This is not about manipulation of others. It is about transformation of the self. It is about taking the energy of no and letting it fuel your greatest yes. Rejection, in its raw form, has a way of pressing against the deepest, most fragile layers of the human soul. It is not merely the absence of acceptance. It is the felt sense of being excluded, of having our hopes turned back upon us like an unanswered call in the dark. Most people experience it as an indictment of their worth, a silent verdict that says, "You are not enough." Yet, in truth, rejection almost never speaks about our absolute value. More often, it is the whisper of misalignment, a signal that what we sought was not, in essence, what was meant for us. This is a subtle truth, but one that can save a life from the slow erosion of self-belief. To understand this, one must look inward with courage. The natural reflex to rejection is to turn the blade inward, to wound oneself with the belief that the world's refusal is a mirror of our inadequacy. But when we do this, we confuse circumstance with identity. The fact that a door does not open when we knock is not proof that we are unworthy of doors. It may simply mean we are standing at the wrong threshold. When we shift the meaning of rejection from "I am not good enough" to "this was not the right fit," the sharp edge begins to dull. This reframing is not self-deception. It is a more accurate reading of reality. Life is a vast field of patterns, each seeking its proper match. To demand that every pattern accept us is to misunderstand the nature of harmony. Not every note belongs in every chord. Not every key fits every lock. And this is not failure. It is the way the great design preserves balance. Thomas Edison, a man whose name has become synonymous with invention, knew this instinctively. History tells us that before the light bulb illuminated the modern world, there were thousands of unsuccessful attempts. Yet he did not call these attempts failures. He called them steps. Each rejection of a method was not a condemnation of his ability. It was a necessary filter, sifting away the unworkable until only the luminous truth remained. Imagine for a moment if Edison had taken each failed trial as proof of his personal inadequacy. The light bulb might have remained unborn, the world a little darker. Instead, he saw rejection as information, a clue, a redirection, an ally in disguise. This is the essence of using reverse psychology on the self. When the instinct is to recoil, to shrink, to bleed from the wound of being turned away, you instead lean into the event as though it were a teacher. You replace the question, "Why me?" with "What is this teaching me?" That shift is small in form, but vast in effect. It transforms the psychic posture from that of a victim to that of a strategist, from a passive sufferer to an active learner. To live this way requires a certain maturity of spirit. It asks you to step outside the ego's need for constant validation and to look at life with the eyes of a craftsman who is shaping his own being. A craftsman does not curse the tools that chip away at his material. He understands that the chisel's resistance is what reveals the final form. In the same way, rejection is the chisel shaping the contours of who you are meant to become. If we are honest, many of the things we once prayed to have, we later thank the universe for withholding. The job that slipped away may have saved you from a slow suffocation of your spirit. The relationship that ended may have spared you from a lifetime of quiet despair. In the moment, we see only the loss. With time, we see the liberation. And yet, we need not wait for years to pass before understanding this. We can choose, in the very moment of rejection, to ask, if this is being taken from me, what is being made possible instead? Here lies the deeper psychological alchemy. Every rejection contains an unseen gift. The ego will resist this idea, for it thrives on attachment, but the deeper self recognizes the wisdom. The removal of one path is the creation of space for another. That space is uncomfortable. Its emptiness feels like a wound, but it is the fertile emptiness in which something truer can take root. There is also a curious paradox at play. The more we learn to release our grasp on what rejects us, the more often life returns to us something greater in its place. This is not mysticism, but simple alignment. When we cease to chase what is wrong for us, we free ourselves to notice what is right. The refusal of one person, one opportunity, one dream is not the final word. It is only the closing of a chapter whose ending we could not yet understand. The tragedy is not that people are rejected. The tragedy is that they remain trapped in the moment of rejection long after it has passed. They build shrines to the no they received, revisiting it in thought, nourishing it with attention, until it becomes a defining feature of their self-concept. But you are not meant to carry your rejections like stones in a bag. You are meant to study them, learn from them, and then set them down. When we redefine rejection, we strip it of its power to humiliate us. It becomes instead a compass, quietly pointing away from what does not belong to us and toward what does. The emotional wound begins to heal because the narrative changes. You are no longer the one who was found lacking. You are the one being guided towards something better aligned. And if you can internalize this, if you can truly believe that rejection is not a statement about your worth but about compatibility, you will move through life with a quiet, unshakable confidence. You will understand that every no is not an ending but a selection process. You will meet rejection not as an executioner but as a guide, one whose language you have learned to read, and in that reading you will find the strength to continue, perhaps not on the path you expected, but on the one that was always meant for you. There is an almost primal reflex within the human psyche when we are denied something we deeply desire. It stirs like a restless animal within us, the urge to chase harder, to prove to the rejecting hand that we are worthy of their acceptance. This reaction is ancient, born from the survival instinct to pursue what seems scarce or withheld. Yet, in the complex arena of human relationships, ambitions, and aspirations, this instinct can often lead us astray. The truth is, chasing in the wake of rejection rarely brings the fulfillment we seek. Instead, it too often communicates desperation, and desperation, though it is a cry of the soul for recognition, paradoxically repels the very thing it longs to attract. This is where the art of reverse psychology, not aimed at manipulating others, but at reshaping our own posture toward life, becomes a powerful ally. When the door closes, the counterintuitive move is not to pound upon it with greater force, but to step back. This stepping back is not a collapse into defeat. It is an intentional withdrawal, an act of reclaiming one's own center of gravity. It is the quiet yet profound decision to cease pouring energy into convincing another of your worth, and instead to invest that energy in deepening your own. When you do this, you begin to harness the laws of perception that govern human behavior. Just as in economics, the value of a commodity rises when it becomes rare, so too does the perceived worth of a person increase when their presence and attention are not given away cheaply. The human mind is drawn toward what is not easily obtained. In this way, scarcity becomes not a manipulation but a natural expression of self-respect. You are no longer available to what diminishes you, and that very posture alters how the world engages with you. There is a story of a young professional whose experience illustrates this truth. She worked tirelessly in her company, taking on responsibilities, delivering results beyond expectation, and setting her sights on a well-deserved promotion. When the promotion went to someone else, she felt the familiar pang of rejection. The instinct rose within her to fight for it, to present more evidence of her value, to persuade the decision-makers to reconsider. But instead of succumbing to this impulse, she did something unusual. She stepped back. She redirected her focus entirely toward honing her craft, broadening her expertise, and making herself indispensable in other areas of the organization. She did not protest the decision. She did not make herself smaller either. She simply poured her efforts into becoming so undeniably capable that her value could not be ignored. 6 months later, the same executives who had overlooked her returned with an offer for the very role she had once sought. She had not won them over by pleading for recognition. She had drawn them back by removing the chase and amplifying her value. There is a deep psychological elegance in this approach. When you chase, you confirm in the mind of the other that they are in the position of power, that they are the prize to be won. But when you withdraw, you subtly reframe the dynamic. You are no longer petitioning for entrance into their world. You are tending to your own. You show, not through words but through action, that your worth is not contingent upon their acknowledgement. This creates a tension, a curiosity, even a quiet admiration. The very absence they once believed would go unnoticed now becomes conspicuous. It is important to understand that this withdrawal is not a form of passive aggression, nor is it a game. It is not about punishing others for rejecting you. It is about redirecting your life, force toward that which you can control, your growth, your skill, your sense of self. It is an inner turning away from the exhausting pursuit of validation toward the fertile ground of self-mastery. And as you build this inner wealth, you inevitably become more magnetic. People, opportunities, and even those who once turned you away begin to sense the difference. They see a person who no longer seeks permission to exist in their fullness. The irony is that in this space of self-containment, many of the things we once pursued begin to gravitate toward us. This is because the energy of need and the energy of abundance send entirely different signals. Need says, I lack, and I require you to fill the gap. Abundance says, I am whole, and you may join me if it serves us both. The former invites pity or avoidance. The latter inspires interest and respect. This principle is not only relevant in careers or negotiations. It is woven into the fabric of human connection itself. In relationships, for instance, the relentless pursuit of someone who has shown disinterest almost always drives them further away. But when we gracefully step back, centering ourselves in the recognition of our own worth, we release the pressure that suffocates possibility. We give the other person the space to feel the absence of our presence, and sometimes that space becomes the very catalyst for their return. And if they do not return, it is not a loss. It is the revelation that they were never meant to walk with us in the first place. To withdraw the chase is, in essence, to reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. It is to refuse the illusion that your life's meaning hinges upon the approval of another. It is to choose dignity over desperation, substance over spectacle. It is a refusal to barter your self-worth in exchange for acceptance, and instead to allow your worth to mature in the quiet work of becoming who you are meant to be. In the beginning, this can feel like a kind of death. To stop chasing may feel as though you are abandoning your dream or relinquishing your chance. But over time, you begin to see that what you relinquished was not the dream itself. It was the need to contort yourself in order to achieve it. You see that the world does not shrink when you withdraw. It expands, offering new and unexpected paths that were invisible in the blinding tunnel vision of pursuit. In the deeper layers of the psyche, something even more profound occurs. The act of withdrawing the chase signals to the unconscious that you are not at the mercy of external forces. It affirms your own agency and autonomy. This quiet assertion of independence strengthens the inner structure, making you less susceptible to the oscillations of others' approval. And when you are less dependent on that approval, you paradoxically become more capable of attracting it. The world responds differently to a person who is not chasing. There is a steadiness in them, a presence that does not clamor for attention but commands it naturally. They move through life like one who knows their value and does not need to shout it from the rooftops. And this is not an act. It is the natural outgrowth of having turned inward, of having invested in the substance of self rather than the performance of worthiness. In this way, rejection loses its power to throw us into a spiral of frantic pursuit. Instead, it becomes a moment of recalibration, a signal to redirect our energy toward that which cannot be taken from us: our growth, our skills, our character, and our peace. And when we do this, we discover that the chase was never the way to win what we truly sought. The way was always to become the kind of person for whom those things are naturally drawn. And that becoming begins the moment we stop running after what is running away from us. There is a strange and almost alchemical power in the way we choose to respond to the energies directed toward us. Much of life is a mirror, a constant exchange of subtle signals between one psyche and another. Most people, without even realizing it, fall into the trap of reflecting not what is best in them, but what is projected upon them. If they are met with indifference, they collapse into neediness. If they are met with dismissal, they grow defensive. This reflex, though human, often traps us in the very dynamic we wish to escape, because it affirms the other person's perception rather than transforming it. But there is another way, a way that belongs to the realm of conscious response rather than unconscious reaction. It is the practice of emotional mirroring, not in the sense of imitation, but in the sense of reflecting the tone you are given with composure and quiet strength. When someone treats you with indifference, the instinct may be to lean forward, to overcompensate, to warm the space between you with extra effort. Yet paradoxically, this only affirms the other's sense of control, telling them, "Your withholding works. I will do more to win you." But when you match indifference with calm detachment, not coldness, but the steady presence of someone who values themselves, you alter the entire atmosphere. This is not a withdrawal into bitterness. It is a demonstration of inner equilibrium. You are showing, without words, that your self-worth does not tremble in the hands of another's approval. This composure unsettles the rejection dynamic. The human mind, upon expecting a predictable reaction and not receiving it, is forced to reconsider. An interviewer who anticipates resentment or pleading in the face of rejection, and instead receives genuine gratitude, cannot help but reevaluate. There is a subtle but unmistakable strength in the person who is capable of hearing no and responding with dignity. That strength lingers in memory. It marks you as different, and different is difficult to forget. I recall the example of a friend who sent her manuscript to a respected publishing house. She had poured her soul into her work, and though she hoped for the best, the reply she received was polite but firm. The book was not a fit for their current list. She could have responded with the silent bitterness that often follows such moments, or with a defensive plea for reconsideration. Instead, she wrote back, "Thank you for your time. I respect your decision and wish you success with your chosen authors." That was all. No hidden barbs, no false humility, just a simple and gracious acknowledgement. Months passed, and without her prompting, the publishing house reached out again. They remembered her professionalism, her poise, her respect, and they were curious. In that curiosity, the door opened once more. Why did this happen? Because her response disrupted the expected pattern. Most people, when rejected, unconsciously confirm the other's decision by reacting in ways that justify it, through neediness, defensiveness, or disengagement. But when you mirror the energy you receive with balance and grace, you signal a kind of self-possession that is rare. You are no longer just another candidate, client, or acquaintance. You are the one who remained centered when most would have been thrown off balance. There is a deeper psychological principle at work here. In every interaction, there is a silent negotiation of value. If you appear to need validation from another, you assign them greater power over your sense of self. But if you can meet their indifference or even rejection with equal calm, you subtly convey that you are their equal, that your value exists independently of their recognition. This does not always win them over immediately, nor should that be the goal. The aim is not manipulation, but the preservation of your own dignity and the quiet statement that you will not be moved from your center by another's fleeting judgment. This approach requires inner discipline. It is easy to mirror kindness with kindness, enthusiasm with enthusiasm. It is far more difficult to meet detachment with poise or rejection with generosity. Yet this is the very practice that strengthens the deeper self. It teaches you that your emotional state is not at the mercy of another's behavior. It shifts the source of your stability from the external to the internal. In doing so, you not only protect yourself from the turbulence of others' moods, but you also create an unspoken intrigue. People notice when their indifference fails to provoke insecurity. They wonder why, and in that wondering, their perception of you changes. This is not about pretending not to care. It is about genuinely recognizing that your worth is not diminished by someone else's inability or unwillingness to see it in the moment. When you know this not just intellectually but as a felt truth, your responses naturally carry that quiet authority. You no longer need to prove yourself. You simply stand as yourself. In this way, rejection becomes not a moment of diminishment, but an opportunity for demonstration. It is a chance to show, both to yourself and to others, that you are anchored in something deeper than approval. And often, when the winds of circumstances shift, those who once turned away find themselves drawn back, not because you chased them, but because you held your ground and reflected back a steady, dignified light. The mirroring was not a tactic. It was an expression of self-respect, and that, above all, is what lingers in memory. There is a quiet force in the human spirit that becomes visible only when one stands free from the need to be chosen. It is the posture of a soul that has learned to rest in itself, unshaken by the fluctuations of approval and disapproval. When you embody this, you radiate a kind of power that cannot be faked. It is not arrogance, for arrogance is loud and brittle, built on the fragile scaffolding of comparison. This is something deeper, a serene self-possession that does not need to advertise itself because it is already whole. The "I don't need this" energy is not a dismissal of life's opportunities, but a statement that your being is not defined by whether those opportunities accept you. This subtle shift in your relationship to approval alters the way the world responds to you. In its absence, need creates a constant pressure in human interactions. It seeps through tone, through posture, through words unspoken. People feel it even if they cannot name it. The quiet pull of someone asking, "Please validate me so I may feel real." That pull often drives them away, not out of malice, but because dependency is heavy. It burdens the connection before it has room to grow. But when you remove that need, when you stand before another as a complete and self-contained being, you invite curiosity rather than resistance. Others lean in, drawn not by the demand for their presence, but by the mystery of your sufficiency. Nowhere is this more visible than in relationships. We have all seen how desire can sour when it turns into attachment that clings too tightly. When another senses that you cannot breathe without them, they instinctively seek distance. It is not cruelty. It is an unconscious reaction to the loss of balance. But when they perceive that you are whole without them, that you would choose them not from need, but from abundance, the dynamic changes entirely. They want to understand the source of that wholeness. They wonder what life has shaped you in such a way that you can stand steady without their approval. This curiosity can be more magnetic than any display of effort or persuasion. The same principle echoes through every realm of human endeavor. In business, the most sought-after collaborations are often with those who appear selective, those who clearly operate from a place of having something to offer rather than something to prove. In art, the work that captures the collective imagination is often created without pandering to the crowd, born instead from the artist's uncompromising devotion to truth as they see it. In leadership, people follow most willingly those who do not claw for their loyalty, but inspire it naturally, through the steadiness of vision and the absence of insecurity. Social psychology has long recognized the paradox of human attraction. We are often more drawn to that which is slightly out of reach. A study found that individuals whose approval was harder to secure were perceived as more valuable and more desirable. The scarcity of their attention acted like gravity, pulling others toward them. This is not because they played games of withholding, but because their attention was genuine and given by choice, not by desperation. The moment you no longer seek to win over every person you meet, your presence becomes more potent. Rejection, in this light, can be the perfect stage for embodying this principle. When you are told no, the temptation is to chase after the lost approval, to prove your worthiness beyond doubt. Yet the wiser path is to redirect that energy toward yourself, to make yourself so centered, so aligned, that the absence of their acceptance no longer stings. You begin to live as if their choice was never the axis of your existence. And in doing so, you reclaim the freedom to simply be yourself without the constant burden of performance. To live in this way is to shift from the economy of need to the economy of choice. Need is exhausting. It keeps you tethered to the ever-changing tides of external validation. Choice, on the other hand, is liberating. When you choose rather than chase, you are no longer at the mercy of others' whims. You can welcome them into your life without binding them there, and you can release them without fracturing your own sense of worth. This mindset is not a mask you wear, it must be cultivated from within. Pretending not to care when you actually do is not strength. It is a performance, and performances always crack under pressure. True self-possession comes from a deep engagement with your own life, from building your skills, your inner resilience, your sense of meaning, so thoroughly that your value is not up for negotiation. In this way, when you say, "I don't need this," it is not born of dismissal but of truth. You are already whole, and what comes to you will be met with gratitude, not dependency. Paradoxically, it is often at the moment when you no longer feel the compulsion to be chosen that life begins to offer you more choices. People are drawn to those who seem to be moving with their own current, not anxiously reaching for a place in someone else's stream. Opportunities seek those who stand steady enough to hold them without fear of loss, and the respect you command in such a state is not granted. It is recognized as something that was already there, waiting only for you to own it. In this way, the "I don't need this" of mind set is not a wall against the world, but an opening. It allows you to engage with people and possibilities from a place of freedom, not fear. You no longer enter a room as a beggar for attention, but as an equal among equals, able to give and receive without the invisible weight of needing to be affirmed. And when you do this consistently, you will find that you are no longer chasing life. Life begins, quietly and inevitably, to chase you. Rejection, when viewed through the lens of the unconscious, is not simply an external event. It is an initiation. It is the psyche's way of drawing a boundary, redirecting us toward a path more congruent with the deepest patterns of our being. To transform it into a narrative of power, we must first recognize that the pain it stirs is not meant to humiliate us but to awaken us. Every no contains a hidden yes, but that yes is often to a different door, a different path, or a deeper part of ourselves we had not yet explored. When you decide to tell the story of your rejection with strength rather than shame, you step into the role of author rather than the role of casualty. This shift is monumental. The event itself does not change. What changes is the psychic imprint it leaves upon you. Many live their entire lives haunted by moments when they were told, "You are not enough," carrying those words like invisible weights. Yet the moment you decide to weave those rejections into a narrative of growth, you strip them of their power to diminish you. They become markers of evolution, evidence that you have been refined by fire rather than consumed by it. Think of the singer who was told her voice was not fit for the stage, who left the audition with tears in her eyes but a seed of defiance in her heart. That seed, nourished by years of discipline and belief, grew into an artistry so undeniable that the same industry that once dismissed her now celebrated her. Notice, she did not erase the rejection from her story. She carried it, held it to the light, and made it part of her legend. The sting became a signature. In your own life, there are moments when you stood at the threshold of something you desired and the gatekeepers refused you entry. In that moment, you felt the cold shadow of exclusion. But imagine reframing that memory. Instead of telling yourself, "They did not choose me," you tell yourself, "I was being redirected to something greater." You recall the skills you developed, the resilience you forged, the unexpected encounters and opportunities that would never have come had you remained fixated on that single door. This act of restoring is not denial, it is integration. Denial buries the pain, but integration transforms it into fuel. It is the alchemical process by which lead becomes gold. By speaking your rejection as a turning point rather than an endpoint, you invite others to see it as proof of your depth, not your deficiency. People are drawn to those who have faced the storms without losing their center, because they sense in such individuals a strength that cannot be faked. There is a quiet power in telling your story without bitterness. Bitterness keeps you chained to the moment of injury. Pride, however, liberates you. It allows you to say, "This happened, and I am better for it." And the remarkable thing is, the moment you start telling the story this way, you not only change how others perceive you, you begin to believe it yourself at a deeper and deeper level. The unconscious takes its cues from the narrative you feed it. If you keep replaying your defeats as proof of your inadequacy, your psyche will oblige by reinforcing that identity. But if you speak them as catalysts, your inner world will reorganize around strength and possibility. Every no in your life can be repurposed into a chapter of triumph. The business deal that fell through may have cleared the path for the partnership that truly aligned with your vision. The relationship that ended may have freed you to become the kind of person who could meet a deeper love. The job you didn't get may have spared you from years of work that dulled your spirit. The no was not a wall, it was a signpost redirecting you toward the terrain where your roots could truly take hold. You have the power to choose whether your rejections are the scars you hide or the emblems you wear. The difference lies entirely in how you hold them in your story. When you recount them with ownership, they cease to be moments where you lost. They become moments where you were sharpened. And that shift changes the way people respond to you. They no longer see you as someone to be pitied, but as someone to be respected, perhaps even admired. In this way, rejection is never the end. It is the redrawing of the map. It is the psyche's way of saying, not here, not yet. This is not your mountain. And if you have the courage to listen, you will find that the mountain meant for you is not smaller or lesser. It is simply the one you were born to climb. And when you reach its summit, the rejections you endured will no longer feel like closed doors. They will feel like the very winds that carried you upward. Rejection is inevitable, but its meaning is not fixed. It is raw material, neutral until you shape it. When you master the art of reverse psychology, you take the force that was meant to push you down and redirect it to lift you higher. You become untouchable not because rejection stops happening, but because you stop bleeding from it. When the next door slams in your face, remember perhaps it was never your door, and perhaps the hallway it forces you in to will lead to something far greater than you dared imagine.